Hello everybody, or AOP as I always say. Apologies for the dramatic darkness. You're about to witness dawn on my reef tank. If you've not, you probably can't even remember what tank I had. So this is it's a 55 gallon 3 foot wide tank, and I have connected to it by what's called a water bridge. I've got a 34 gallon refugium, which is basically rammed full of I'm going to say that what everybody else says you should say, chaetomorpha, a macroalgae. And if you're unfamiliar with it, what that does is, as the fish excrete in this main display, they're producing impurities which you then want to get rid of, and the macroalgae grows and takes those impurities out. My problem has been, God, there's lots of PPP. It's going to be a problem, that, isn't it? My problem has been that, my corals have been outgrowing my dosing. So I was doing ICPs and I was dosing, and as fast as I was dosing, the corals were just sucking up things like manganese and cobalt and chromium and vanadium, and I'm not even sure whether chaetomorpha needs chromium, but they're constantly at zero. So another problem was that my chaetomorpha wasn't really growing, and I was thinking, why is this? So yeah, finally it's taken me a blooming long time, probably, don't know, a couple of years to dial it in, and even so I'm not exactly on top of it, because if you've been in this situation before, which I haven't particularly, but your corals just want to grow. I mean, they want to explode with growth, and I'd have to do an ICP test every week, but I ain't doing that. It's crazy money. And so things are on the up anyway. And so what have I got in there? At the moment, you can't see many fish. You've got my 4-bar damsel, which just went out of sight. And then at the back, you've got a really lovely wrasse called a yellow-tailed tamarin wrasse, which is, I've always wanted one, and I knew that you needed to be quite experienced. When I got home, I bought the bugger, and when I got home, I read, all about it, and I thought, oh my goodness. And so I've had it for about 3 months. I quarantined it for probably 6 weeks, I think, in another tank with 15 chromis, which you'll see in a bit. They'll start popping out of the stylophora. It's really nice. Although, stylophora is easy to grow, and people may poo-poo it, and it's a bit of a boring coral, but what's great is it shows the chromis sort of live in it, as does the 4-bar damsel. You see, it came out then. They all seem to live in it. It's a great sort of place to hide and be protected from predatory fish. Not that there's anything predatory in here, but so although I've got quite a lot of it, and I think that's the stuff as well that really sucks sucked up my well, initially it was the manganese. I just couldn't get a reading. In the end, I was buying the Triton manganese, and that's the cheapest, believe it or not. If you buy it in a litre, for a litre it's £110, and I was going to have to dose 600 quid a year just of manganese. So a heads up, I read up about manganese, DIY, do-it-yourself solutions. So I bought some, and it's absolutely dirt cheap. One thing it said on the forums is that it degrades. I don't know whether it oxidates, or I can't remember what happens to it, but it sort of degrades. But I've been using this DIY solution for about, I think, 4 months now, and it's definitely not denatured at all, and I've got absolutely tons of it. So if you're in the UK, give us a shout and you can have some. So instead of 600 quid, it's like 6 quid. It's crazy, isn't it? So yes, you can see on the left. I'm sorry about the light levels, but that is a sort of true representation of dawn, really. The light's coming up, and it's dark. The lights have just come on. There's my first chromis appeared, and the damsel just gives it a little nudge, and that's called a signal. I think it's called a signal jump. You see what that just did then, the damsel, the black and white. So eventually you'll see my 15 chromis. Bullying, I haven't seen any, really. You see it a bit when they wake up, and you see it a bit when they go to sleep. There's a bit of a pecking order going on. But apart from that, I know, I sort of thought, I wondered what is the magic number for chromis, because if you don't know and you get a few, say you get 5 or 6, one by one, the weakest seems to get picked off until they die, and then you end up with like one left over, I believe. And I didn't want that. And one of the benefits of my big refugium being able to pull out a lot of nutrients, although I can't say it's particularly dialed in, but everything's behaving itself, I must say, nutrient-wise. Well, just about, actually. If it wasn't for lanthanum, I'd be stuffed, because the chaeto is extracting enough nitrate out of the system, but phosphate, it's not at all. But the lanthanum is just awesome in my opinion. It's a little bit dodgy in that you've really got to be on the ball. If you don't know what lanthanum is, it basically precipitates phosphates out of your water column. So if you've got high phosphates and you're bunging a load of lanthanum, the phosphate pretty much disappears instantly. It precipitates, as I say, and so it's just a solid and not available. And it's a bit of a dangerous game, because you have to be on the ball, you have to be testing. I've got it dialed in a bit. Anyway, going back to the bullying of the chromis. So far, again, I don't know. Maybe when these chromis get bigger, then there'll be more bullying. But for now, there isn't any. And I feed heavily. That was another thing I was going to say about the big refugium. One of the advantages of being able to pull out lots of nutrients is my dream was always to be able to throw in as much food as possible, so that basically the fish don't starve. I remember, and so I've sort of got there. I'm sort of probably, for now, I wouldn't get any more fish. I'd like to, but I need to see where my nitrates go, and in fact dial in the corals basically first, because I'm still at 0 with, as I say, cobalt, chromium, and zinc as well. I bought a DIY zinc, so I'm not quite sure whether that's doing its job. I think if it wasn't, I'd be getting some RTN or STN on the corals, and I'm not getting that. So the DIY zinc was dirt cheap as well, and I'm going to have to see if I can source some cobalt, because I'm chucking that in, and it's all adding up. I'm just wondering whether if you get I can't remember what it's called, when you have a CO2 canister and it dissolves the dead corals. I assume that might actually be a cheaper way. Once you get to the stage where you've got quite a bit of SPS, and maybe that's going to be the cheaper way than buying all these blooming solutions. But anyway, so the chromis, you can see they're gradually building up. They're still not all out yet. They sort of peep their heads out of this stylophora. And there's my yellow tang, which is this tank's about just over 7 years old. About 7 years old anyway. And I got the yellow tang quite quickly. The last 2 or 3 years are very, very gradual. At first I didn't know what it was. Fungal infection on its fin, on its is it called its dorsal fin, the top fin. And I thought, what's going on? It was really slow, and so I didn't think it was fungal. But anyway, I think I identified it as fin erosion, which I think leads to HLLE. What is that? Lateral line disease or something. And so anyway, I've not got any. There's no damage to the lateral line or anything like that, but there was this fin erosion. The sort of fin goes a bit white, and so probably about a year ago, I think I probably upped my feeding twice a day. I may have been doing once a day, which is a bit normal. Well, I didn't have this many fish, but no, I was probably doing twice a day, but maybe not as heavy. Definitely not as heavy as I am doing now. And that definitely made a difference. In fact, it's definitely, I don't know whether it's done permanent damage, because the front part of the dorsal is sort of diminished, and I think it'll probably grow back, but anyway. Somebody commented actually recently about I used to look at my tang and go, the colour's not very good, and recently, because of I've got a few acros in there, and I supplemented with I've got 2 AI Hydra 26s on there. And in fact, they have this burnt. If you've got AI Hydra 26, when they're off, have a look at the plastic lenses, because mine are burnt, and apparently it's quite common. So I don't know whether I'm going to switch them out or what. Well, I will switch them out, but whether the LED underneath has been damaged, I don't know. So I need to do that. But anyway, so I supplemented it with a Kessel 160 WE, which is a small little thing. And I turned up the white light. And the colouring on the yellow tang is just awesome. In fact, it is on all of them, when you get the white light in. Now, you see that little bully? That is an angelfish. It's a pygmy angelfish. What's it called? A royal blue pygmy angelfish. And when the tamarin wrasse first came in, that blooming there it is, just in the middle now. You can see that pygmy angelfish was horrible to it, absolutely horrible. Chasing it, and oh god, it's horrible at first, isn't it? It's that initial, when you introduce new fish, it's like, are they going to make it? But it calmed down within a couple of days, and now it's barely anything. You know, it doesn't like the tank. Sorry, it doesn't like the tamarin wrasse going to the other side of the tank, but the tamarin wrasse goes anyway and just gets out of its way if it has a go, because the tamarin wrasse is a rapidement. So yeah, so I've got quite a bit of Aptasia. That's doing my head in. I bought some couple of peppermint shrimp. As again, that was, I don't know, a few months ago, quarantined for 6 weeks and then bunged in here, and they have not touched the Aptasia, and they haven't touched them, and they're bloody huge things as well, these Aptasia now. So yeah, I'm not sure what I'm going to do there. Not sure what I'm going to do. I've got some bubble tip anemones. Don't know whether you can see them on the far left. They're not very expanded because it's first thing in the morning. There's a couple. There's actually 4, and they've split. Which I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, them splitting. I don't know whether that means they don't like your water or what. But it was nice to get those, and yeah, my clownfish weren't interested, and now of course they're on the opposite side of the tank to the clownfish. I'm not fussed. It'd be lovely, you know, if one day, you know, something miraculous happened, but I don't really see the clownfish. It's a bit sad, isn't it? And you can see now there's a pair of them, obviously, and they're at the back. They lay eggs, actually. You know, they lay the fry, and then, you know, after about, I think it's about 7 days, they must get eaten. So I never see them. But yeah, you see the lovely little, you know, hundreds of them sort of stuck to the back wall at the back. Anyway, in a bit you'll see I'll feed this tank, and yeah, and then you'll see the clownfish then. So what have I got in here? I've got my bubble tip anemones on the left. They seem to be behaving themselves. Yeah, they seem happy. They don't seem to be requiring much light. Yeah, they don't particularly want bright light, and they don't particularly want high flow either. Yeah, people have sort of said, oh, why is my anemone not bubble tip? Why have the bubble tips disappeared? I don't know. I mean, it's probably, who knows what it is, but I mean, the bubble tips, I suppose, are to keep the tips floating. So if you've got high flow, it's definitely not going to like that, and it'll get rid of the bubble, because otherwise it's going to blow its tentacles off. There's probably many reasons for it, but that's one that sort of seemed, don't know. Yeah, I thought that was obvious, really, but yeah, but who knows? I've got no stuff. Like I say, I've only just got them about maybe 4 or 5 months ago, so I don't really know much about them. They're nice to have. I would have liked a rose bubble tip, but anyway, it was sort of given to me for free, which was rather nice. Always swap some corals. So I've got some acros. I've got a few acros. My problem is space, because I don't want to get rid of the stylophora. I really like the fact that it creates a habitat and protection for all the fish, really. They all sleep in there. So yeah, so you can see I've got I don't know whether you can see a Pocillopora just in front of the stylophora. It's a bit pathetic, this, isn't it? You won't really know unless you know exactly what you're looking for. But the acros are doing okay. I think they need a bit more light, and I would imagine the burnt lens ain't going to be doing much good. It's going to be blocking out UV spectrum, and that's going to be no good. So, but I think the intensity as well, the par's not great enough. So if I'm going to be in the acro game, I'm going to have to step up my lights a little bit. But the acros are behaving themselves. My problem is stinging. I've got them all in next to each other, and one stings the. In fact, there was a coral that got stung, and I thought I was going to lose it. And while it was stripping, it then stung another bloody coral, and started stripping that. Anyway, they both survived, but it's just annoying. Yeah, so what do I dose in here? I use the old Kalkwasser. I've been using that for, since time began. And I also, on top of that, I dose the sodium bicarbonate and the calcium chloride as well, sort of. Yeah, so I don't have a auto top off. This is my little advice, which you don't have to take, to beginners in getting rid of your auto top off. I haven't had one for years. I basically dose. So instead of that, you'd buy a doser, which of course is a bit more expensive, but I'm not. I think you can buy sort of two doses, can't you, for probably a similar price to auto top off. So you dose the water. You dose every hour the water, and what it means you can do is you can take water out anytime. If you want to take a cup full of water out, if you do that with an auto top off, instantly it tops it up with blooming RO water and dilutes your solution. And also I think you have to keep everything clean. If your overflow gets dirty, then the water level rises in the tank, and I'm assuming down in the sump where your auto top off is, that level then lowers and dilutes it. Or does it higher? I don't know. No, it lowers, doesn't it? So there's all sorts of reasons. Another reason is as well with auto top off, when you dose Kalkwasser, if that auto top off fails in any way, before you know it, it's dosed 5 litres of Kalkwasser and killed your entire tank. Yeah, so and another reason, getting a doser means you can practice your dosing as well accurately. So you can get into dosing quickly, which is a good thing. Even if you're dosing really dilute solutions, I think it's a good thing. So that would be my advice to beginners. Yeah, don't go for the auto top off. They've probably changed, but the ones I got, they used a sort of suction cup thing, and it fell off. And then there was another time when to me they were just blooming useless. And with the dosing, okay, you've got to evaporation rates can change, so you have to be sort of aware of that. But I barely change what I dose every hour. Evaporation doesn't seem to. And in the winter, I have a dehumidifier as well, so that sort of keeps things constant. So yeah. Oh, you can see just about the clownfish. She's quite a big brute actually. She's her and the yellow tang are the sort of boss, but the yellow tang's the boss really, and occasionally flicks its tail, and it's got that sharp knife on the back of its tail, and occasionally see the odd cut very occasionally in the clownfish. So things are going well. What do I have? I've got algae. I've got plenty of algae. Like I say, for me, I always wanted a dirty tank. I didn't want to do a clean tank, low nutrients. You're on the edge, and I think it's more likely you're going to crash your tank. With a dirty tank, you're probably not going to crash it. It's just maybe you're just not going to get as much growth. I mean, another bit of advice to beginners is get a decent phosphate Hanna checker. So the ultra low Hanna checker for phosphates, and also get a really good nitrate. Well, I think the Red Sea Pro nitrate checker is good. And when I see people using sort of rubbish kits where you can't really, you need to be in tune, I think, with nitrates and phosphates. So just spend the money. It ain't cheap, but it's worth it. It's nothing better than you speak to any of the experienced reefers, and there's nothing better when you've done a test or you get your ICP back and you know exactly where your tank is. So although tests are a bit of a pain, at the same time it's great to know where your tank is. So my phosphates are around 10 to 15 parts per billion, which is about, I think it's 0.03, that, isn't it? 0.03, maybe a bit more. I don't like it going lower. Recently, actually, it was went down to 0, and boy, the bubble tips, they just disintegrated. I mean, they didn't die, but I don't know whether you've ever seen it, but the gaping mouth of the anemone, the bubble tip anemone, and I thought, oh my god, this isn't good. What is going on? So anyway, I did a test for phosphates, and lo and behold, I hadn't tested for a week, which is a bit daft. I'd been a bit slack. It's probably about, I don't know, maybe a month ago. And my lanthanum I was pumping the lanthanum in as well. And and the bubble tip didn't like that. So it just went really small and the mouth gaped. But it came back within sort of 6 hours. It was back to its normal way. My nitrates are behaving themselves at the moment, actually, which is amazing. I was getting a bit worried because I got this new bioload. I got the 15 chromis and the tamarin ras, and my nitrates started creeping up. I think they may have got to about 5 or 6. I don't want them there. So for the past sort of month now, I think it's been hovering around 1.2 parts per million. So I'm happy with that. Yeah, I'm definitely happy. I mean, you can sail closer to the wind if you want to lower your nitrates. You're going to get faster growth, definitely, especially when your phosphates are around 10 parts per billion, and you lower your nitrates to about 0.08. You start getting really fast growth, but the only problem is it just sucks. It sucks all your phosphates and nitrates, and they just go to 0, and so you can't get any stability unless you were testing all the time. I don't know whether you can. I don't know how accurate those. I think there's an auto tester, isn't there, for phosphates? But I don't think it's. To me, it doesn't look accurate enough. I'd want it to be parts per billion, and I don't think it is that accurate. Otherwise, that would be. Although it's about, I think it's about £1,000. So I prefer to just suffer doing the tests every day. I don't do them every day actually. I've been quite lucky recently with the phosphates, the Hannah checker. I've been doing it about every 3 or 4 days because I'm attempting to read my tank visually. I look at the glass, and if you get the green on the glass, the sort of powdery green algae, then I know there's phosphates in there. If I'm not getting that and my the front glass is remaining clean, then I think, ooh, right, okay, and I'll do a test for phosphate, and lo and behold, it's at sort of 5 parts per billion, which is, your 0.015 ppm, which for me it's too low. Because one, you don't know how accurate the Hannah checker is. It may be lower than that. And so if you're a beginner, and even the more experienced, when they're using, sort of tests that aren't really very accurate. I mean, the Hannah checker has its flaws. I mean, boy, trying to get a decent reading out of that sometimes as well, it can be challenging. What I do is, although Hannah don't recommend it, but I'll do the test and I'll then take readings, about 4 readings, to try and fathom, what the correct reading is. They say just take one. You take one reading and take that, but no, that's rubbish in my opinion, because I've done that. I'll do a test and I'll take a reading and it's 30 parts per billion, and then I'll test it again sort of 5 seconds later, 10 seconds later, and it's reading 10 parts per billion. And I have a feeling there's little flecks. You look in the vials. I'm just chucking in some calcium chloride. I basically chuck. I've got the Kalkvasser on a doser, but because I'm dosing all the single elements, cobalt, manganese, blah blah, all of that. I've got about 15 different bottles, and I dose them all in one go. Well, I'm splitting the cobalt and the chromium in two doses during the day. So I bunged in my calcium there first thing, and I bung in the magnesium. I'm bunging in a lot more magnesium as well. Because I was thinking I'm not really getting much coralline here, and my magnesium was sort of, the ICP test was reading about 1200. In fact, I got an ICP test back about a few days ago, and it was reading about 1000 actually, which is far too low. So I've that reading with 1000, and I've been chucking it in. I mean, I've been throwing it in, but I think I'm getting a bit more of the coralline algae growing now that I'm chucking it in. So initially I was dosing, I think, what was I dosing? About 28 mil a day, and now I'm dosing 140 mil a day. It's crazy, isn't it? The difference. Magnesium's a really weird one, actually. Again, it's worth sort of, just observing it, upping your dose, and see what difference it makes. Because so I'm preparing to feed. This is their morning feed. So they've been waiting about 40 minutes, and you've been listening to me droning on for about 40 minutes. So well done if you've got to this stage. So you can chuck it's a funny one, magnesium, definitely, because it seems to sort of remain at that 3 times 3 times the calcium levels, and there's some sort of buffering going on maybe. Yeah, I've got my own theories on that one. I mean, they're probably well written about anyway, but yeah, so I've been chucking the magnesium in, and definitely there's a lot more pink going on, which is good. But also I've been chucking in a lot of all the there you go. So I've bunged in, what do I bung in there? I've got a couple of mysis. So the tamarin wrasse is the one that needs, it's pecking at all the zooplankton, but at the moment now it's eating, so it eats krill, it eats brine shrimp, and it eats the mysis, and that's what it likes. When I first got it, actually, it was quite plump. Poor thing, probably been plucked out of the sea, which is a little bit sad, isn't it, for us aquarists. And then it lost weight. Man, I thought, in quarantine as well, and anyway, it's putting weight back on now, so I'm happy. I'm happy enough. I'm still. I'd quite like to maybe breed some. I don't know whether they eat those Tisbe copepods, so I think I might start breeding those. I make my own phytoplankton, which I bung in every day. Actually, I'm thinking of bunging in more phytoplankton as well, increasing the dose. Yeah, that's another recommendation for beginners, is treat everything as a maintenance. So, feed exactly the same every day, exactly the same stuff. What am I trying to say? Yeah, be constant with what you do. So repeat everything day by day, and that creates stability in your tank, and that includes foods, because those foods have got a good amount of elements in there, the minor elements. So you need to dose the same every day in order to get a constant maintenance dose. Again, that's my hypothesis, whether it's true, but that's what I do. So I dose. So I feed the same amount every day, and I'm feeding 3 times a day with these guys, particularly for the tamarin wrasse. Yeah, the snails are all behaving, not dying, which is good. I definitely a while ago had problems with trochus snails. Those Astriatecta snails, I love those guys, but people don't like them because they don't right themselves. When they fall down, they can't sort of pick themselves, they can't put themselves back up the correct way, and they die. But I like them. But the trochus, I was having problems with the trochus. They don't seem to be as hardy, and I don't know why. I'd bung them in my tank from my quarantine tank, and they just didn't like the water. They just did not like it, because in my quarantine tank, which is not, it's not a copper tank. It's just a fallow tank, which I put all my new stuff in for about 6 weeks, and then I move it into this tank. And the trochus snails they sort of fell off, or they'd stopped moving, and it was awful. I think it is because of the 0 minor elements due to the sucking up by the stylophora, because I guess I've got quite a concentration of that stylophora. I think it just sucks elements up like you wouldn't believe, because it grows quite quick. I mean, I've sort of purged it, big chunks of it, giving it to people. It grows quick. So I've rabbited on enough, haven't I? But welcome back, everybody who's made it this far. And Why has it been so long since I posted? Well, I got a new, I used to do it with my phone, and then I got this, cinema camera, and I just couldn't get round to, it's a new process, isn't it? When you get something new, it's a sort of new process to learn. I mean, you've got to learn software, and I mean, I'm recording this. I hope the sound levels aren't too terrible. I'm doing this with a microphone that I used to use. What is it? It's about, you can probably tell it's a 25-year-old microphone that I used to sing with, but no requests, I'm afraid. And so I'm doing that, and it's taken this long to just get round to learning how to do it all and put it all together. And as you can see, I've gone for the lazy option of shooting for 40 minutes because I wanted to show the sort of the dawn, the waking up of the tank, which I think is, well, I enjoy it. I'm normally high on caffeine now. By 40 minutes later, I've dosed myself up, and after this I'm ready for a day's work. So I hope everybody is okay, and hopefully it won't be another year and a half before I post the next. I need to get some close-ups really for you, don't I? The Acropora. What am I struggling with? Millipora. I'd love to know. Don't know if anybody wants to let me know. I guess people grow it quickly, but my Millipora. Oh, I have another problem actually. You've not noticed. I don't know. You can just see it in the back, on the back left there. That I've got a yellow clown goby. And when I first put the Acropora, they'd been in quarantine for 6 weeks, and they were doing okay, but they needed to go into the main tank, and I bunged them in the main tank. No, in fact they were fine. They were fine, and the Millipora went into the main tank, and the tentacles were really long, and everything was great. And then the blooming yellow clown goby was just pecking at the polyps. And unfortunately, it's taken 3 weeks for it, because I think these acros have been in back. They came out. I then pulled them out of the tank, bunged them back in the quarantine, and maybe I've put them in maybe 4 weeks ago. I can't remember, 4 or 5 weeks ago. And it's taken 5 weeks for it to learn that they're there, but in the last few days it's learned. Anyway, I've got to go. That's it. So I'll catch you again, and thanks for watching. See ya.